and to be together tonight in as much as we can. My slogan for this time, I think I've already written it in 3 essay sermons or bulletin articles or something in the Fed News. We may be apart from one another. We may be physically apart from one another, but we are still a part of each other. And that is another one of those prime directives that I think that we as Jews have to remember at this particular time in our lives. There's a very famous psychologist and author at the New York Presbyterian Hospital in the Weill Cornell Medical Center named Dr. Robert Leahy. You can look him up. He's written several books. I think one of them actually is a bestseller. But he wrote recently in an article, it's in his psychology, he said, what we're going through right now is a perfect storm for depression and anxiety. He writes on in his article, with COVID-19, lots of people might feel hopeless. Lots of people might feel helpless. We are facing a national trauma. This is a direct quote from him. We are facing a national trauma, whether it's fear of being infected or of infecting someone else or the economic downturn. And many people are isolated, Dr. Leahy says. When I read this article, it occurred to me that there are a lot of people in this world that might have lost their hope. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. And it's interesting that, you know, every week, no matter what sort of baggage I tend to bring, and that was my baggage this week, I find something in the Torah that speaks to me. And it says, you brought this baggage, well, let me tell you, says God, what I think it's about. So this week's Torah portion, which we'll study tomorrow morning, Ve'et Chanan contains the Shema Yisrael, the V'ahavta, and it contains the 10 Commandments. Now, this is the second telling of the 10 Commandments. The first telling goes back, or the first thing is in Exodus. This is a repetition of the 10 Commandments. This actually is the second, not only the second telling of the 10 Commandments, but it's the second portion in the book of Deuteronomy, the last book of Torah. According to Jewish tradition, this whole book takes place in 37 days. It's Moses' speeches, Moses' teaching before his passing. He is reviewing the events that occurred during the 40 years of wandering, and he tries to teach the people for one last time. If you know what, when I think about this, especially now in my life, I think about this as grandfather Torah. He's going to die, but he's got to teach his kids, who never listened to him perhaps in the first place, and he's got to teach his grandchildren one last time what's really important in life, because he's got all that wisdom. When I was younger, I didn't listen to my grandparents, and I don't expect my grandchildren or my children to listen to me. And maybe Moses did, and maybe he didn't. In his case, they're going into the promised land, so he gives it a shot. And what is it in Hamilton? He said, I'm not going to waste my shot. That's what Moses said. I'm not going to waste my shot. He's going to tell his children, the grandchildren, the 600,000 Jews, the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, the Israelite people, what he's learned, what they've experienced. Will they listen? Will they heed his words? Probably not. But he's not going to waste his shot, because Moses is going to say, at least I'm going to try. But something else struck me in this portion. It's a very small thing, but when I was studying it, I found an amazing commentary. Moses is telling the people that he asked God to be allowed to enter the promised land, but he's not going to be. Think about this, 40 years, he's on the other side of the Jordan River, in the mountains above the area across the river from Jericho. And God, after he asked him to let him go into the promised land, God tells him, Moses, you got to go to the summit, Mount Pisgah. Ale Rosha Pisgah, B'sa Einecha, and go up there and look around. And then he says, Yama v'tzafona temana which is the word for Teman, Yemen, which is the south of Mizracha. And what is he saying here? Go up there and take a look around. Okay? And his order, this is what's key. He says, look to the west, look to the north, look to the south, and look to the east. And behold what you see, but you're not going to cross over. Now, it occurred to me that that's a weird order. Okay? It's a weird order. Westward, by the way, makes sense because he's looking from east to west. That's the promised land. Northward makes less sense. Southward makes less sense. And eastward makes no sense what at all because that's the mountains of what today is Jordan behind him. So I'm looking at the promised land this way, but that way. Why am I looking at that land? And he says, this is the land that you're not going to go into. Well, I don't want to go into that land. I want to go that way. For the Bible, this is not the usual order. West, north, south, east. If you look at the story of Jacob, after he climbs the ladder, Jacob's ladder, it says, and your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad, Yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba. You'll spread abroad to the west, where the sea is, to the east, to the north, and the south. And that's most of the time, that's the order in the Torah. Again, in this portion, it's west, north, south, and east. But in most of the time, it's west, east, north, and south. South is always last. Think about that. It's even true in English. In English, we say north, south, east, and west. The word news is an acrostic, an acronym or something. And it comes from, the word news comes from the north, east, west, and south. But here you got this weird order. Moses is 120 years old. Will he enter the promised land? No, he'll not enter it. But then he's told, look around, look to the west, the north, the south, and now the east. Makes no sense. What's going on here? First of all, as I mentioned before, Israel's to the west. But why 4 directions? Maybe there's something more here. Maybe there's really a lot more here. Perhaps in a way, with less than 37 days, we don't know which day it was, but we know that according to tradition, Deuteronomy takes place in only 37 days. The last 37 days of his life, maybe he's got 30 days left. And Moses is being told to review his life in a different way. Okay, in a different way. Again, with the order west, north, south, and east. And then I came across commentary by one of the greatest Reform rabbinical commentators of the last century, Rabbi Solomon Freehall, of blessed memory. He noticed a strange order. And he said, you know, I'm not the first one to do it, to notice that order. He says, because there was a Sephardic Torah commentary written in the 18th century by a Rabbi Yaakov Cooley and others. It's called Me'am Lo'ez. Listen to this, folks. It's written in Ladino. If you don't know what Ladino is, it's an amalgam of Spanish and Hebrew. It's like the Sephardim's version of Yiddish. They have Ladino. By the way, Ladino music, there's a lot of interesting Ladino music being created nowadays. It's absolutely drop dead gorgeous. So then this guy in Ladino, this Me'am Lo'ez, he says, why the order? Well, he starts off, let's think about what the West is. In Israel, the West, you're looking towards the West, you're looking towards the sea, the Yam HaTichon, the Mediterranean Sea. And the sun sets there. In the West, it's the end is gone. You know, it's almost, there's so much in there. It's like the Peter Yarrow song. And when you take my hand, my son, I will be there when the day is done. That's the West. Things cannot be changed. The Western mentality is what is done is done. And then the second one is the North. So in the North, This Me'am Loez, as Yaakov Cooley says, the north is cold and dark. But it's in the Hebrew Bible, it's also the place from which the enemies of Mesopotamia would always attack the Israelite state. By the way, during the Second Temple, if you've been there, if you've seen the model of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, you'll see that there were actually, under Herod's time, the first wall, which was the Temple Mount itself, a second wall, and then another suburb and a third wall. And all of these three walls were facing towards the north. They were facing towards the north because Herod, as well as even before during the time of the first temple, they understood that the Mesopotamians were the superpowers of the world. And that's where destruction could come. So he built three walls. Maybe if the third one fell, everyone Herod thought could get behind the second. And if the second wall, maybe they could go up to the Temple Mount. We know this happened in the year 70, of the Common Era, 70 CE, that on the day known as the 17th of Tammuz, it was about a month ago, the third wall fell. And then the second wall fell. The 17th of Tammuz is a fast day, actually. And then on the 9th of Av, which was this past Thursday, the first wall falls and the temple is destroyed. 3, 2, 1, always facing towards the north. So here, they have the south. The next one is the south. What is the south in biblical times? It actually refers to in this verse as Teman, which means Yemen. Down the south, Saudi Arabia, Yemen is at the end of the Arabian Peninsula. But south is also called Hanegba, the Negev, where the Negev is in southern Israel today. It's dry, it's wilderness. Yes, there's potential there, but everything's wilderness. By the way, if you know anything about Jewish history, it was David Ben-Gurion who saw the potential there. But in biblical times, other than Beersheba, Gornish, Butkus, there was nothing there. So the last thing that Moses is told to do is look towards the east. And again, that's crazy. Because in the east is not the direction he wants to go. So he says, okay, the east. What is the east? The east is the direction from which the sun rises. Tomorrow. He only has 30 days to live or maybe less. But it's tomorrow. The sun is going to rise. And all the things that we have yet to do, we can do tomorrow. And all the things we want to do, we can do tomorrow. And all the things we need to do, we can do tomorrow. Today is done. But God is everywhere. North, south, east, and west, or as he says, west, and then north, and then south, and then east. God is everywhere. But he ends up with the east because what is God trying to tell him? God is trying to tell him, you may be old. You may only have a few days. I can tell you right now, not only does you can tell Moses, but you can tell every one of us, how much time do we have left to live? The answer is clear. One less day than yesterday. God does not tell him when he says the east that most of his life is over. Rather, he says, you have to ask what can be done in the days you have left. And this is why east is last. Yes, he says to Moses, in a way. Yes, yesterday is behind you, but tomorrow's ahead. Yes, he's saying to all of us, yesterday is behind us, but tomorrow is ahead of us. And even though some of us may be like Moses with limited time, nevertheless, the bottom line teaching, the prime directive teaching of Judaism is a message of optimism. Moses is the most outstanding teacher in all of Jewish history. But he is mortal. He will die. And eventually all of us will die. Hopefully not too soon. But even in the face of an uncertain future, even in the face of knowing that his time is so limited, Moses looks eastward to where the sun will rise tomorrow. Even in the face of disappointment and hardship, he and we And we are told to look eastward towards tomorrow. I'll tell you, when I was looking at this, I thought of that song, from Annie. The sun will come up tomorrow. Everybody knows that. Bet you bottom dollar there'll be sun. Just think about tomorrow. What a great song. It's great modern Torah. Okay? So tomorrow has so much to teach us. Yes, the sun will come up, but tomorrow there'll be things to do, things to see, a world to be improved. Tomorrow there'll be a virus to be defeated. Tomorrow people are going to be healed. Tomorrow there'll be justice to be achieved. Tomorrow there will be compassion that will be given. Tomorrow there will be a world to be repaired. And tomorrow there will be peace to be obtained. There's so much to do tomorrow. Such a horizon of possibility tomorrow. At the top of Mount Pisgah, Moses looks in every direction. He looks west, he looks north, he looks south, and then he looks to the east. Even though it doesn't make sense, he looks to the east where the sun will rise, because that is tomorrow. And what is Moses saying to the people? Even though he's not going to go with them, he's still got a few days to tell them. And his message is, seek out the future, folks. Have a vision. Try to see what is beyond the next horizon. Seek tomorrow, no matter what. Seek tomorrow, no matter what, and be hopeful. Psalm 126, it's wonderful, wonderful song. It says, those who sow in tears will reap in joy. The national anthem of the state of Israel, Hatikvah, means the hope. We have not lost our hope, the hope of 2,000 years to be a free people in our own land. Martin Luther King, of blessed memory, says, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Listen to that again. What great Torah. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. And finally, John Lewis. John Lewis says, be optimistic. Never lose your hope. Be optimistic. Never lose your hope. So tonight, I hope that it's God's will in our task. That as we face next week, we will enter the week renewed, rejuvenated, R-E-J-E-W, rejuvenated with strength, renewed with the strength to combat the despair and fear that we have in our daily lives at this time. May it be God's will that we will have the strength, not only to combat despair and fear, but to have faith and hope in the new day that is coming. May it be God's will that we will be grateful for all of today's blessings. And may it be God's will that we will be able, may it be God's will that we will be able to envision the hope of tomorrow, to envision that tomorrow there will be tikvah. There will be hope. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will and may it be our task. And together let us say, Amen.